Okay. Hold
That's all right.
it. Okay.
Okay. Welcome everyone, once again. It's amazing. Then time has passed and I think this may be the 17th live stream that I'm doing. It's hard for me to imagine that I've gone through so many. And there's still a lot left to talk about, of course. Let me ask everyone though, can you actually hear or not? Yeah. It's okay. Try. But we're having trouble with our microphones, so bear with us. The technical issues somehow came. Now can you hear me better, worse, or not at all? No. It's working? Well, that's curious.
Better.
Is it better, actually? Okay. Okay. Well, I'm glad about that. So here we are once again. The pandemic is still somehow surging ahead. People are arguing over whether... are you okay? Yeah. Okay. People are arguing over whether the world is moving into the second wave already earlier than it was expected, or whether this is still the first wave. That all seems like a bit of sophistry to me. The important point is that it's still, although in certain places may be under control, it still is not under control in so many places. And even where it is under control, it dangerously can become out of control. So please, everyone, still be careful. And social distancing is what we have to do. Masks are very important. All of this. I want to spend just a moment to mention John Lewis. John Lewis, who passed away just a week ago, was last Friday. It's sort of after our live stream. Then John Lewis was, to my generation, a model and an icon. He was someone who affected so many people's lives, and personally he affected my life in a very, very big way, I must say. His speech on the March on Washington was eloquent, stirring, and what I found out personally just recently is that his original speech was even stronger than the speech he gave finally. There was, you can find it now, that's the original one. I will not say much except that he has his memoirs, and I just show them to you because this is a wonderful collection book. Yes. Okay. And his legacy must continue. And his honesty, his humility, and his moral certitude should remain a model and an influence for all of us. Well, thank you for this little bit of eulogy that I give for him. The time I was the schoolboy, really, at that time, but was tremendously affected by him, by Martin Luther King, by so many, by everything that was happening at that time. Oh, I have to talk to the microphone. I understand. Okay. Enough of that. I will be. Now we come to the topic at hand, but I must say first I wanted to do one little thing here before we come to it. Let me see if I can, if I have organized myself in a good enough way. I have to find it. No, this is it, but okay, this will, what I want to do. I don't have it here. Sorry, I'm disorganized once again. But I have a lot, but not what I had wanted exactly. Wait, is this it? No. I just thought, as part of this, to introduce some composers who should be known, and for us, and for most of you who are clarinetists, should be rather important because we do not have this incredible, vast repertoire, or I should say standard repertoire, of the handful of great composers, so that we can sort of just devote ourselves to that. What we need as wind players, as clarinetists, is variety. And because we don't have this huge volume of sonatas by Mozart, by Beethoven, we can actually explore a much wider range of repertoire. I think this is a good part about being a wind player. And I wanted to introduce a couple of composers, and one was Samuel Coleridge Taylor, who I'll say a little bit about him, but I will really talk about him next week, I think. When it's here. Let me see. I do actually have. I'm working electronically now. We'll see how that pans out. Can you hear me? Everyone has been saying that I'm much too soft, and I think I'm probably mumbling. But anyway, okay. Yeah, I just say because though I do know his music, I don't know his biography so well. That's why I'm reading a little bit about it. He did not live very long. He was born in 1875, and he died in 1912 of pneumonia. But he is one of I would say, one of the great composers who did not live long enough to actually fulfill in a certain way their destiny. For clarinetists, he wrote a wonderful quintet for string quartet and clarinet. And that's all I'm going to say about him now, because next week I will actually prepare this in greater detail. This I was supposed to talk about last week, but I didn't have time. Once again, it didn't work out, but it will eventually. Okay, first thing I want to do is speak about expression. And here, I'm going to just try to organize myself a little better now. Okay, let's put this way so it doesn't ring. And I should mention Lawrence Gilliard Jr. Now, Lawrence was on the show which Andy Simon, my great friend, colleague, I will boast that he was a former student of mine also, had on his, sort of interviewed him. Lawrence started out as a clarinet player and became actually a very, very well-known actor. Now, when I saw the interview, what struck me was a few things that he said. And this had to do, he said, with what he felt was in a way the difference between when he was studying clarinet and when he was studying acting and finally acting. And the difference he mentioned was, first he said that acting has to do very much with trust and has to do with opening oneself and, most important, with listening. As he mentioned, the way that you can learn your lines, but what is most important is listening and then taking from what other people are doing and building on that as you are actually acting. And I thought, no, this is exactly what music should be. And in fact, perhaps so many of us are in a certain way on the wrong track in that we are practicing the technique, we're practicing this, we're practicing that to get this in a particular format, etc., etc. While, of course, we need to do that. Just like if you're acting, you do. There's just funny things happening behind the camera. That's yeah, but I had to turn off the air conditioning, and now it's really boiling. So I need to get a. Here, 1 second. I'll be right back. It's okay. This is good enough. Yeah. Okay. So we should say also that music should be the art of listening. And the expression that you have has to do very much with your reaction after you listen to your colleagues and also to your audience. So that if you're playing, you communicate, of course, with the audience, and most of the time they're not incredibly demonstrative in classical music, although maybe they should be, and they used to be. In fact, Mozart expected, when he would be playing, even in a chamber music concert, when he would be playing a particularly beautiful phrase or a particularly virtuosic passage, that his audience would react in a way. Now, Brahms also was very disappointed when, after he finished a piece, that the audience, even though it would be only one movement of a symphony or of a piano sonata or of a chamber work, if the audience didn't clap and didn't respond in a very vocal way. Of course, what happened in the 20th century is that people sort of went, well, this is serious, so we better just sit tight and listen. And there is something to be said for that, because if you have a long work, which is made up of many sections, perhaps you should feel the whole thing, but the moment in the performance is something which should be most special. And then that brings me to my topic, which is called universal expression. And music has been called the universal language, blah, blah, blah. And it's something that Mendelssohn was very keen to emphasize. And in fact, there is a lot to this, because any kind of music has expression, is involved with expression, and the way you express perhaps is a little different, but has a lot of confluence. Whether it is jazz, whether it is classical music, whether it's different folk musics, whether it is rap, with anything that has this essential sense of expression. And this is what I want to speak about now. So, how should I do this? Because I also want to look in particular at the Weber First Concerto, and you would say, well, I'm speaking about all these general big topics, etc. And then I just want to look at Weber. It seems kind of silly, but it's actually quite interesting, because Karl Behrmann, who is the son of the clarinetist for whom Weber wrote, this is Heinrich Behrmann, Karl Behrmann, in 1870 decided to put an edition out of all of Weber's works. And what he wanted to do in this edition was somehow recapture what he remembered of the expression of his father when he played the piece. And his father was, of course, a great virtuoso, and one must have been a wonderful musician, and he was also a decent composer himself. So there was a project that Karl Behrmann had in mind, which I think was very, very worthwhile. However, what came out of it was something which, first of all, I think was very much misinterpreted, and second of all, was not successful, is because, what should I say? Perhaps there was a lack of I don't know if it could be said deep thinking, or simply a lack of looking at these pieces as how should I say, harmonic entities. That's right. So, what should I do first? I think first I'm going to actually play a few things for you, because I want to, before I play, and I'll play myself, I hope I'll have time, but I want to play from various parts of the world, different kinds of music, so we can hear the sense of expression the sense of the emotion that the music evokes, even in all these very different genres. So, here I come back with my new chair. Okay, and let's try to do this. Now I think I remembered how to do this here. Even though I've done this before on this, it always goes back. Now I think it will work. Okay. And I play all these for you because these are involve musicians most of the time, most of them, not all of them, but most involve musicians who actually were important for me in this. So I start with this, and I cannot play all of it because he is actually playing for longer than this live stream will take. This is the remarkable sarod player from northern India, Ali Akbar Khan, and he was also a very big influence on me. And I'll maybe skip around a little bit. Uh-oh. This comes from 1969. The instrument is sarod. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I will move on, I think. I go to the end, maybe. Okay. We don't have time to finish this. I should say that the tabla player was the wonderful Mahapurush Misra, who often played with Ali Akbar Khan, and is also a wonderful musician. So here, I mean, you just get a little bit of a sense of what is happening, how little by little he draws you into the music and ends with a kind of ecstasy in this. That's the train. Okay, I will go to a few other things. We go something very different, and this is here. I think I should go back to toward the beginning. No. The shakuhachi. Made a mistake. Why? I'm sorry, but with here, actually, I will continue with other things now, perhaps. Here. And this is Armenian duduk.
Next.
Yeah, no. And in oud. Move on.
Showtime.
No.
Let's do this. Enough. Got it.
What's that?
It's okay.
I know.
It happens.
It happens. But I was supposed to get it. Okay. Now, this is, we go back to India now. And this is a flute, but this is South Indian music as opposed to Ali Akbar Khan's Hindustani or North Indian music, also called Carnatic. Let's go back to here now. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit there. Let's see. I'm just wanting to show these are from very different places, but they have always this kind of thing. Now here's another flute shakuhachi. Ah, wait. No. Okay, now I go back here. This is okay. Continue a little more. Let me find, yeah, here. Now we move to Korea, and this is a piri, which is a kind of oboe. Okay, just play little bits of everything. I know it's a little bit long I'm doing here. Let me go to just two more things. Okay, we go totally different, and to someone who was also very influential for me. His name was Ornette Coleman, who was a remarkable musician, jazz saxophone player, and composer, music philosopher as well. Who also played violin, is Ornette Coleman. And here, if you listen carefully, you may have remembered when I was talking about Sidney Bechet and how he listened to Beethoven. Listen carefully to this here, and you will hear the Rite of Spring.
Is this you or Anna?
Ornette.
I'm a big bacon guy. Big bacon
sorry.
boy. Yeah, a big bacon boy. Yeah. That's great bacon. It's good bacon.
I know. Okay. This is from 1978. love to play the whole thing, but we can't. But here, this is one of the great things here. Let's see what I can do. This is Billie Holiday and Louis Armstrong in 1947. So, why do I present all of this very, very varied and totally different kinds of music there? Is that there is an essential sense of expression which is common to everyone, to all of that, and has to do with the feeling of, I should say, a physical feeling of communication of the. And we can see this happens through dynamics, it happens through rhythmic detail, it's like that. And I will speak more about this. Now, I also want to mention here that there are what I call iconic gestures in music. That's a lot of sort of in musicological circles. There's been there's a lot of talk of what's called topics. I never liked that word, and that comes from I must have the book somewhere here, which is I just want to show people. Oh, do I not have it? This is Classic Music by Leonard Ratner. In any case, well, it's somewhere else. But that's one of the two most important books for me about classical style. The other one, of course, the Classical Style by Charles Rosen. But classic music has many very interesting. No, that's about Schubert. That's over there. It's okay. It's also a blue cover. But classic music had many topics which became actually quite important in understanding of classical music, but I actually believe of music in general. And topics were things like particular rhythmic figures which came from the minuet or a saraband, etc., or different kinds of things like that. But I do not talk about these things, but about something even much more general, which are what I call iconic figures of expression. And there is, in the classical times, there's a particular gesture which I call the classical icon. And for this, I go to the piano here. And we have, of course, as usual, its most complete expression in Mozart. So that the falling sixth, there could be a falling fourth that resolves, and this is a gesture which had particular, I believe, emotional meaning. This way. And we find this in so many different pieces, and we find it also, of course, in Weber, we find it in Spohr, and I should get my clarinet now, maybe, and do something here. 1 second. But I also need more stuff. Yes, we have a very professional kind of photographic thing here. Okay, let's put that in. Now, let's try this here. What is this reed? Well, I'll try it. Sort of okay. Okay. So, if we take made up, this Spohr First Concerto, of this particular expressive icon. This way. This way. This is a particularly terrible reed, but I'll keep using it. I think I'm mumbling again. Is that right, or can people actually hear me? You can hear me okay? The mic is a little closer. Okay, so that's one thing. This kind of gesture here, and I should mention also that just like here, this is that it's always slurred because it has the sense of tension and release. And when Spohr does it, for instance, could be that, but he gives it extra tension as it moves on this way. Okay, now what does this have to do with the music that you were just listening to, different kinds of folk music? Right? It has to do with a physical sense of the expression of this interval. That way. So it's not simply, oh, I must play this way, but this feeling of this moving to here. that's one thing. Now, I move on and for instance, here, this is on here. We go to Weber. I just put this here. Concertino. Just little advertising, I guess. And it's not something I need, but I do this in a way. So, again, we have this gesture, which he uses in a very different way, but also has similarity. So, if I play from here, I just want to know what I should do. Yeah. So we have this. I didn't play correctly, did I? It has the same, this internal kind of pathos that we have. And then he changes that. This throughout. And then as the piece moves on, we have this going on, the same kind of thing happening until the ending. Again, this gesture happens. And we should feel it as coming out of this introduction. And then, of course, here. That way. And what did I want to mention? Again, it has to do with articulations with this, which in most editions is, I believe, not that way, but that way. But in fact needs to have this feeling of this iconic gesture, which is slurred. We go back to Mozart, and for that I'll use another clarinet. Maybe I can find it here. It's okay. No, I'm going to go back here, but I need the clarinet here. Then I have another reed. Wow. This is going to be this is the day of the bad reed. I know. Okay. I'm not going to play this reed. I'll go and I'll play this other mouthpiece and everything. I've been shamed. Yeah, what was that reed? I just have to mention, well, since I'm stuck in this room here, I have so many reeds, old reeds, that I just keep sort of trying this one, trying that one. And of course, most of them are old bad. Okay. So, and that ends up continuing and developing in the concerto until we have in the slow movement, of course, that kind of gesture continues it through the slow movement until in the last movement it becomes a very big feature of the movement. So, okay, we don't answer that phone. So here we have this iconic gesture that Mozart's using and becoming more and more and more present. And as performers, let's just wait till that finishes. I think it's done. Okay. It's a lot of stuff happening now today. Yeah. So as performers, we should feel how this builds. This iconic gesture builds, gains importance, and gains, in a way, emotion until the last movement. And then that way. Okay. Oh, I don't have a thing. Maybe this will be just a little bit finer. So I move now to what I wanted to do, and this has to do, this is with Weber. And the first concerto, yeah. And let me get this here. I wanted, because I should have. I have such a large amount of music that I wanted to actually go through, but of course I'm not going to get a chance for most of that. And even the beginning of it, wait, I need to put this back to the right place. Maybe I can put this here, put this here. I'm going to put my read on totally, not correctly, but hopefully it'll still work. So if we have again, we have a variation of this iconic gesture in the very beginning. And so that F sharp that we have has very important kind of tense meaning. Okay, now I speak about Berman's edition. If we go to Weber's manuscript, and there are actually 3 important manuscripts of this piece. 2 are in Berlin, and 1 is in the Library of Congress. Can you hear me? It's okay. This way. And they're all very interesting, although they have little differences, but they do have similarities, which are important, and I will point them out. Now, what Berman did, Karl Berman, that is, he recomposed parts as he remembered the way his father played. And he did this with a very minimal number of symbols. And I think all of these symbols can be misunderstood in ways. But not only that, he also, I am sure, misremembered certain things. And we take for the very beginning, for instance. And why am I saying this? And why am I pointing this out? In this basic discussion of expression and of the universality of expression. And that has to do with the primacy, as I mentioned very early on, of the appoggiatura. And this kind of leaning on the notes. And one thing you hear in all the pieces, all the selections that I played for you, right, is this sense of leaning which creates different kinds of meaning depending on the way it's done. But anyway, it's that way. And if I speak, I have a sense of appoggiatura. So I say anyway. I don't say anyway. But, and I say but. And going back to Lawrence and the idea of opening up and listening to your fellow actors and audience, we as musicians have to act. We are actors employing the universal language of music. Okay, so I come back to Weber now, and I will explain the issues of the notation that Berman used and the problems of that, but also, and probably even more important, the problem of not understanding the appoggiatura. Okay, so the manuscripts have very little in terms of articulation, have very little in terms of dynamics also. And Berman's edition has much more of all of that. But here we have this. This is what Weber writes. That way. Now Berman recomposed that. That's okay. And then this one. And I have to say, when I first looked at this piece, and I was, I don't know, a very young teenager, and I looked at it, and I played through this, and I thought, no, this has to be wrong. Something just does not sound right. In fact, I confess that when I first went through this piece, I thought, this is a pretty bad piece. Who is this composer Weber? That's, why does everyone think he's such a great composer? Okay, I put my foot in my mouth, my mouth in my foot. Anyway, okay, now why is that really essentially wrong? And why is it important for us to understand that it's wrong? Here is why. We have, first, we're in F minor. There's our note. And then we have here. Now, if you recompose that to this way, we have two problems. And they're the kind of problems that probably, if you take them to your elementary music theory course, for instance, your teacher will mark you wrong. We'll say, go back, study more. And what are those problems? First of all, we're taking an appoggiatura and making it into a passing tone. That's sort of like taking something which has great strength and sort of diluting it in a way that, okay, I didn't really mean it that way. So, and the other thing is that when you have this, you have what called implied parallel octaves. Now, I'm sure that everybody who's listening, whether you are an amateur, whether you're a professional, whether you're a student, whether you have just very passing knowledge of music, you know that parallel octaves are basically not the greatest things. Yeah, so you have that rather than that way. Now, I assume that as Berman remembered, Carl Berman, that is, remembered how his father played, perhaps his father did play, and I'm sure I have to backtrack a little bit and mention that, of course, his father played this more than once, and I'm sure that he played it differently each time. Most likely, because when he was playing, it started, the first performance was in 1811, still this idea of improvisation, of ornamentation, was very much alive. You still, at that time, had competitions, improvising competitions, for instance. Beethoven was the champion of this, but not only that, other instrumentalists and other, not only pianists, keyboard players, but other instrumentalists also improvised, ornamented, and engaged in ornamenting and improvising competitions. So, it's possible that that's okay. The next one, he could have played that's possible. So that you're playing here you see, which perhaps gives even more emphasis to this appoggiatura B flat C that we play. But the one thing I doubt heavily that his father ever would have done is that. Okay, let's go on now. And we have the next phrase. Again, our appoggiatura keeps building. And there's our icon, of course. And then our icon again. And then he continues with this here. And there is no articulation in this. But we have this. I apologize for this read, but in this part, we also have that icon appearing, and we also have this appoggiatura. Now, I wouldn't say there are rules, but maybe I would say there are rules. And the one rule is that basically appoggiatura is part of the main note. It adds expression to the main note. It adds emotion to the main note, and it should be slurred to the main note. There's probably an exception here and there, and I'm probably in my own playing I've made exceptions. But here, of course, that's again, as so often in Mozart, is another iconic kind of figure. This appoggiatura repeating. So here, and then iconic figure. I probably should change this read. That's what Weber actually writes. Now Berman changed it to, oh sorry, that way. Now I have to mention that I grew up, and I have it here, no, this one, yeah, with an edition of a student of Berman whose name was Schreinecke. This is this Breitkopf edition that everybody of my generation played, at least, and I think even subsequent generations. Now Schreinecke took what Berman wrote and actually made it worse, even. So Schreinecke, in fact, has this, and that actually takes whatever kind of strength and appassionato quality that's important here and dissipates it, just like does as well. So at least when Berman tried to write what he remembered of the ornament that his father played, that keeps this iconic motion. That way, while Schreinecke is totally oblivious to that. Okay, done with that part. And then, but here we go. Again, our iconic motion. And Weber writes, and here he writes, sorry, I'm not transposing. As we have this, now what is written, what Berman wrote and then Schreinecke wrote, is down the octave, and as composition, that makes little sense. So we see again that Berman did not really take the trouble to look carefully at the score which Weber wrote. Because, first of all, we have a viola part here, and then he writes the following also, with only a half note, and then here we have violins with dotted half note, and then we have timpani. And then it goes to there. This piano's become totally out of tune. But into D flat. Yeah. So, what we have here is an orchestrated diminuendo to this mysterious moment. And then going to the next part here. The ending of the piece, you do not have this, and the clarinet is the bass. And there he emphasizes, again, this iconic gesture in a big way, because this is the end of the movement, by moving the octave up. He could have done, but he does that. It's a big, big gesture for this. Okay, we don't have very much time left. So, what should I do now? But I do want to go through a little bit more of this piece. Just in here, this part here, because there are certain mistakes in it, and this is a problem of, first the problem of Beermann, but it was a problem of Weber himself also. It has to do with the issue of minor scales. And here, we have in the development section, we have this part here. And then what we have that in Beermann's edition. What you have in the manuscript is basically no alteration of minor scale at all. Yeah. But why we actually have that? And again, why would, if you took this to, once again, your first year elementary harmony teacher, why would that teacher mark you wrong in this? And for this, I just want to introduce something, if I can find it, because I become more and more disorganized as time was gone by. I was pretty sure that I have it here. So 1 second. Oh, I have so much stuff, but I don't have that. Pretty sure that it was here. This is Nadia Boulanger. We have this. Oh, messy. This is what I wanted to do, and I didn't. Well, I can't believe it. Okay, I don't find it. So I'll prepare this again for the next one, where I sort of can clean up all the mess I'm making this week. Ah, I found it. Here. This is a little book. I know, I'm getting all these views that say, time, it's up, this, everything. This is the most, in a certain way, practical and most complete little book about harmony that I know. It's great. This is actually the notebook of an English composer whose name was Thomas Atwood, who spent some time studying with Mozart. And it's his notebook, which has notations of Mozart in it. Some of the notations are something like, you ass, you don't know anything. But Mozart was prone to that kind of stuff. He was always in good fun. But anyway, it's brilliantly practical, very concise, and Mozart in this book mentions about minor scales. He does not mention that there's a natural minor, that there's a harmonic minor and a melodic minor, which is the way we always learn this. And because we learn it this way, we don't understand the reason for these different scales. So what Mozart says, very simply, is that in ascending position, or the ascending that way, you should raise the 6th and 7th steps. Descending step, you don't raise anything. But if the scale is harmonized in the dominant, you raise only the 7th step. So, if we have here, is that way. And that's why the harmonic minor is called harmonic minor. But let's go back to here. I have these funny chairs. And we have this here. And but that is harmonized in G minor, not in the dominant key. So we have here this kind of thing. That's somehow probably a little bit odd. So that, of course, should be. And then going down, we have this happening in our bassoon. If you do that. So once again, especially we have this. That's not very right at all. So that should be. Then here we're in the dominant. And that's that way. Now this is something that was known. So in a certain sense, Weber didn't have to write it out. Because it had to be that way. And I can imagine, if he's writing quickly, for instance, that you just write this way, and you assume that the performer, in this case Heinrich Berman, would actually do the right thing. So that's the point. And then, of course, here is again melodic minor. Now, there's one other place, and this is especially odd, and it's a kind of egregious mistake, I would say, and that's here. I can't even play it that way. Now, why is that wrong, aside from the fact that it sounds very weird? That's because what is this? For us, that's G minor. Which, if you go up, you're not going to play, or you should not play. This way. This way. So what Weber has done is he's written G minor with, at the end, chromatic flourishes, we could say, to give it more energy and more intensity. So the question is to find out, where do these chromatic flourishes begin? That begins after the re, after the D, so that's okay. This begins after the E, so we need to raise the E. And then here it begins all the way up at C, so you have to raise 2 notes. And then again, after the E. Now what's interesting is that Weber wrote this way. That way. But Berman understood that it would be more elegant to change that F to F sharp. Even though I can see that it's conceivable to play that way. Although it is definitely more elegant and maybe more expressive also to play that way. Now the last movement has this part to it. And here we have E minor. Now once again, Weber did not write the melodic version of that scale. So what you have that. Here again, Berman understood that you had to change it. So he writes that way. And of course that's very correct. But in this place, I guess there were too many notes. So he was confused, perhaps. But we should not be confused, because you play without altering the form of the minor scale, and you get something which actually, if you listen carefully, simply sounds wrong. Okay, now I'm getting a lot of pressure. Oh, do I have a yeah, let me see. Question. The importance of scales and the best way to practice them. Okay. Yes. I'm going to spend a whole whole live stream on ways to practice this way. And of course there are many, many ways to practice, and that's in a way a very important choice, important personal choice as how you practice. Some people practice longer stretches, some people practice shorter stretches, something. But in general terms about practicing, I will have to say that there are two kinds of practicing. There's smart practicing, and there's practicing where you just beat your head against the wall and hope for the best. And most important thing is not to practice your mistake. So if you're playing here, it didn't work. It didn't work. Etc., etc., etc. I will do this in more later, but another time. But anyway, this is for everyone to understand very importantly that when we do something, our bodies do not distinguish between what is actually right and what is actually wrong. Whatever we do and whatever we repeat is reinforced in a way. So if you keep practicing the mistake gets better and better and better, and it becomes more and more difficult to correct the mistake. So, first of all, it is important to try to, from the very beginning, play in a way that you do not make mistakes, and that's the reason for starting to practice slowly, for instance, so that you have things under control, so that you don't actually make mistakes. This way. Now about scales, I think scales are incredibly important, and you should play all the major, all the minor scales, and not only that, but different scales, whole tone scales, for instance. These are scales which can be called octatonic scales or diminished scales, which are whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone scales. these other kind of patterns. All sorts of patterns are very, very important, you see. And how to practice them, many different ways to practice them. First of all, you can just practice just by line going up and down, and I would go very high in this. Again, I'm not going to do this now because it's just going to take too much time. So I will spend a whole time or a big chunk of time on practicing, on scales, on the finger exercises in particular that I like to use. But also broken arpeggios, broken scales, all sorts of different kinds of patterns are very, very important. You can do scales in thirds, scales in fourths, and fifths. All of that will help immensely. But what I'm talking about here is not so much about practicing scales as about understanding in music like this the function of the scale. And that is what you also have to know when you're looking at pieces of music. And if something doesn't sound quite right, most often there's a mistake in the music. And you can be proactive in correcting them. That's very important. Now, I have to just explain a little bit more, if I may, about this. And it always goes on too long. And this has to do with this melody here. I go back to the first movement of this piece, and we have this here. In the way Berman wrote, and that's another thing that I tried to play that in the beginning. I thought, wow, something wrong with this. Okay, but we find out that what Weber wrote was actually quite different, in fact, and what Berman wrote was an ornamented version of this, and this ornamented version is ornamented in a way which I would say is not very interesting. So Weber writes this way. Etc., etc. Okay, but there's one more thing that he writes, which I will mention in a second. But you notice that there's a third. And it's very rare that we were talking about scales, that you have a scale which is a melody. Generally, melodies will have intervals which they don't contradict the scale, but they expand things and give greater interest. You have in Tchaikovsky, I don't have particular. I do have actually a few things in mind, but Tchaikovsky was one composer who could write a scale which had great melodic significance, but that's because of his original harmonic treatment of the scale. Now, in something like this, you don't have that at all. It's very simple. So, what Carl Berman did was simply fill in the blanks, or fill in the space. So it's as if your finger trips. And then he has like this. So it's very busy. Oops, I tripped again. And again. Whoops, what was that? Here. Okay. So first, the simple version is somehow much more beautiful, I would say. But there's one more detail, and it was when I found this detail that I understood what this melody was. And that is this, that Weber writes a low B flat first. Now in more recent editions, especially beginning with one that this fellow Hauswald, who for it's a Günther Hauswald here, I can write here. These were the first editions which actually printed, at least in the piano part, they printed what was more or less Urtext, or more or less what Weber wrote. And not exactly, I have to say. And in that edition, he has a grace note. Now I thought, oh, this is so interesting. That's great. And probably Berman got rid of it because, just technically speaking, oh no, that's hard. So I get rid of it. But when I actually saw his manuscript, which you can see online now, actually, in both at the Library of Congress and in Berlin, the central Staatsbibliothek, the library, central library in Berlin, that we find this, that not only was this B flat there, low B flat there, but it was actually a whole quarter note. That way. And here we have this wonderful melody because of that. And not only that, we understand why Weber was an important composer, just from this little melody here. And we understand the influence which he had on Wagner. And I explain to you exactly what I mean by that. Okay, I want to find it here. Yeah. So we have here this. We have this da. And we have. No, I'm in the wrong place. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's here. So we have this. So we have kind of endless melody with the ends here. We have sorry. Very operatic, but the important thing is that the phrases connect at the ends and give a kind of endless sense to the melody. And although this is, of course, harmonically very simple compared to anything that Wagner wrote, the idea of this connection was important for him, for Wagner, that is. Okay, so my question is, what time is it now? I totally am. So I think that with this, we end now. And once again, I have much, much more that I wanted to talk about. I didn't get to Penderecki or Denisov or all the new music, which is what I really wanted to do. But I guess we will wait till next week, and we will continue with that. So be well, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. I know that it can be quite a ride, sort of difficult ride sometimes. Anyway, take care.